Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep on something pretty heavy, honestly.
Yeah,
The Boeing 737 MAX crisis.
definitely a tough one.
We'll be digging into this Investor article, flash update, Boeing 737 MAX crisis, the fatal flaw and its impact.
Right.
But this isn't just some technical breakdown. We're talking about like a whole corporate culture thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Engineering choices, the human cost, the whole 9 yards.
It all comes into play.
So let's jump right in. This crisis, it kind of started with a good idea, right?
Yeah, I mean, the goal was fuel efficiency. Boeing was under pressure from Airbus.
Right, the A320, super fuel efficient.
Exactly. So Boeing, they needed to compete.
So what'd they do? Design a whole new plane.
Well, that takes time, right? Instead, they went with revamping the 737.
Makes sense. Use what you got.
They thought bigger engines, more fuel efficient.
Sounds logical at first.
Yeah, but here's the thing. To fit those bigger engines,
They had to change things up.
had to mount them further forward on the wings. And that seemingly small change,
Yeah, what happened?
it started a whole chain reaction, a cascade of consequences,
What this led to?
a critical design flaw.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What kind of flaw?
So moving those engines, it messed with the plane's aerodynamics,
Okay, I can see that.
made the nose want to pitch up in certain maneuvers,
Mhm.
increased the risk of a stall.
And I gotta ask, for those of us who aren't pilots,
Sure.
what's a stall and why is it so bad?
So a stall happens when the airflow over the wings gets disrupted. The plane loses lift.
Like a kite just falling out of the sky.
Exactly. Not a good situation for a pilot.
Nope, not at all. So Boeing had to fix this stall risk.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where MCS comes in?
You got it. Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCS.
MCS.
Software, basically,
Hmm.
designed to push the plane's nose down if it sensed a dangerous angle.
So like preventing a stall automatically.
Exactly. Sounds good in theory.
But this is where things go wrong, right?
Yeah. The idea behind MCS was fine, but how they did it, the events that followed,
It's a whole other story.
anything but smooth sailing. Unfortunately, this system,
Became a factor in those two terrible crashes.
yeah, the Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302,
Tragic. Brand new 737 MAX 8s, both of them.
hundreds of lives lost.
We can't forget the human cost here.
Absolutely. Got to acknowledge that before getting into the technical stuff.
Couldn't agree more. These weren't just isolated incidents either, right? Both crashes.
Happened very shortly after takeoff.
Pointing to some serious issues, something fundamental.
Yeah. And investigations quickly zeroed in on MSMAS. This system meant for safety.
Seems like it malfunctioned, sending those planes into uncontrollable dives.
They found that MCS relied on just one sensor for the plane's angle.
So if that one sensor went bad,
MCS got bad info, reacted even when the plane wasn't actually stalling,
a single point of failure.
with potentially catastrophic results.
That's scary. Raises questions about the design, the testing.
Did they miss something crucial? Were other factors prioritized? Those are the questions investigators wanted answers to.
And get this. Internal documents later showed concerns from Boeing engineers,
Even test pilots.
warning about MCS, saying it could cause a catastrophic event.
Strong words.
So why weren't these warnings listened to? Did Boeing's response have a role in what happened?
Now, that's something we got to dig into.
It's just mind-boggling, warnings, but the system still went live with this flaw.
And Boeing's initial response, that just adds another layer to this whole thing.
Really? What'd they do?
Well, instead of admitting there might be an issue with MCS, they downplayed it.
Like brushed it under the rug.
They put out advisories, but they didn't really explain MCS.
Or the risks
Sure.
to the pilots.
Exactly. It was all very vague. So you have to ask, did they know?
But chose not to be upfront about it.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
And it's what everyone was asking, investigators, the public, this lack of transparency.
It makes you question things like corporate responsibility. Was safety really top priority?
And for the families, I mean, first losing loved ones in such a horrible way.
And then it feels like there's no accountability.
It goes beyond a technical glitch. It becomes about trust. And it wasn't just Boeing under scrutiny.
Right. The FAA?
The Federal Aviation Administration, they're the ones who certify planes, make sure they're safe.
So you'd think if the FAA says it's okay, you're good to fly.
You would. But in this case, that trust, it was shattered.
Because after the second crash, other countries grounded the 737 MAX right away.
But the FAA, they resisted.
Really?
Said they didn't have enough evidence.
So you have other aviation authorities worldwide saying, this plane's not safe.
And the FAA is like, hold on, we need more data.
It's a big difference.
Some people said the FAA was too cozy with the industry. hesitant to take action against Boeing.
Like they weren't truly independent.
Others thought they were being cautious, genuinely needed more data before making such a huge call.
But whatever the reason, their hesitation, especially when everyone else was grounding the plane.
It raised questions about their independence, their commitment to passenger safety, for sure.
It seems like a real turning point. What happened next?
The pressure just kept building, from international regulators, from airlines, from the public.
So they had to do something.
In the end, the FAA grounded the 737 MX too. But by then, the damage was done.
So let's talk about that, the fallout. We've talked about the human tragedy, the technical side, the scrutiny on the FAA.
What were the actual consequences of all this?
Yeah, what happened?
Well, grounding the 737 MX, it had this ripple effect on Boeing, the whole aviation industry.
Even the global economy, probably.
Oh, yeah. Financially, it hit Boeing hard. Billions in losses from the grounding, redesigning the plane.
Compensating airlines, lawsuits, it adds up.
Those are huge numbers. And their reputation. That took a major hit too,
Boeing, they were known for innovation, safety. Suddenly, they're the company with the deadly design flaw.
Rebuilding that trust with the public, within the industry, that became a huge
It
challenge.
shows you even the biggest companies, the ones with the best reputations,
They could make mistakes and the consequences.
it can be massive.
And it wasn't just Boeing. Think about the airlines that depended on the 737 MX.
They had to scramble, change schedules, rebook passengers, find other
It
planes.
threw the whole industry into chaos.
And then there's the supply chain, right? Boeing's huge, tons of suppliers and partners.
This disruption, it must have had a cascade effect, hitting businesses all over.
It's like a domino effect.
The 737 MX crisis really showed how interconnected everything is, how vulnerable global systems are.
One weak point can trigger a chain reaction worldwide.
That's the reality. But in all this turmoil,
Was there anything positive that came out of this?
as terrible as it was, the 737 MX crisis forced the aviation industry to take a hard look at itself.
A reckoning.
We had to talk about safety, accountability, how to balance innovation and risk.
A silver lining, even though it came at such a high cost.
Absolutely. So what changed? Well, Boeing, they redesigned MCS completely,
We had to fix it.
made it less aggressive, used data from multiple sensors, not just one.
So no more single point of failure.
And they added safeguards to stop it from activating when it shouldn't.
They faced the problem head on.
There was no other way. The pressure was too much. But it wasn't just the technical stuff.
Pilot training changed too, right?
Because remember, a lot of pilots didn't even know MCS existed.
They had no idea how it worked.
Imagine being in the cockpit and a system you don't understand kicks in. You can't control it.
That's a nightmare scenario.
Pilot training became crucial. And what about the FAA?
Did they change anything after all the criticism?
They had to. The crisis showed weaknesses in their process for certifying planes.
So they stepped up their game.
More oversight, new guidelines for certification, more scrutiny on Boeing's designs and engineering,
Making sure the FAA is more independent, more rigorous.
less influenced by the industry.
Yeah.
It was all about regaining the public's trust, showing they could keep air travel safe.
This is a lot to take in. This 737 MX crisis, it was like a wake-up call.
Not just for Boeing, for the whole aviation industry.
It showed how important strong safety protocols are, being transparent, having a culture that puts passengers first.
And while nothing can bring back the lives lost,
The changes that came out of this, hopefully they'll make flying safer for everyone.
that's what we hope for. It shows that even in highly regulated industries, when safety gets compromised,
Things can go very wrong.
but it also shows we can learn from mistakes, even the worst ones.
And use those lessons to prevent another tragedy. It really makes you think. But this whole 737 MX thing, it's not just about planes, is it?
No, not at all. It's a warning, a cautionary tale that goes way beyond just airlines.
It makes you wonder about corporations, technology, the systems we trust to keep us safe.
All of that.
So what does it mean for us? Everyday people, we use technology, deal with companies, rely on these regulators to protect us.
Means we got to be informed, got to be involved, got to ask the tough questions.
Can't just assume everything's safe, right? Just because some regulator approved it or it's marketed as safe.
Right, exactly. You
Yeah.
can't just trust the label blindly.
We got to be aware of the risks with the tech we use, the stuff we buy, the systems we depend on.
We have a responsibility to hold these corporations accountable.
Make them be transparent when things go south.
Absolutely.
It's like being a smart consumer, but on a bigger level.
Yeah, recognizing that corporate decisions, they have real consequences.
And safety, it should never come second to profits or just getting things done fast.
That's the big takeaway here. This 737 MX crisis showed us Even in industries with tons of rules,
Things can go horribly wrong when safety's compromised.
human error, corporate pressure, regulators missing
You
things.
can have devastating effects.
Even with all our fancy technology, that's the reality.
It's heavy stuff, but in a way, it's also empowering, right? If we understand these issues,
Stay informed, stay involved.
we can help make the world safer, more accountable.
Starts with asking questions, demanding transparency, not accepting complacency when it comes to safety, and doing things the right way.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on the 737 MX,
Let's leave our listeners with something to think about.
think about the technology you use every day,
Your car, your phone, the apps you can't live without.
even medical devices, things that are supposed to help you.
Do you know the risks? Are the companies behind these things putting safety and honesty first? Are the regulators doing their job and keeping an eye on things?
Big questions.
There's worth thinking about.
The 737X story might be over, but the lessons it taught us about responsibility, risk, and staying vigilant.
Those are lessons that apply to everyone, everywhere.
Remember, asking tough questions might be uncomfortable.
But it can save lives.
And that's it for our deep dive today. We hope you learned something that it got you thinking, maybe even made you a little uneasy.
It's important to face these things head on.
Keep learning, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep. We'll see you next time.